All right. Assalamu alaikum. Brother Shadid, Mr. Islam Answers back here with another refutation. This time we're dealing with this person by the name of Dom the Conservative. She looks like she has a lot of anti-Muslim videos. Appears to be another typical bigot, right? Typical bigot, making videos with misinformation, twisting, distorting of, what Islam actually teaches, while claiming to be using actual Islamic sources. So we're going to be dealing with a lot of her claims and attacks. All right. She made a video entitled that, sorry, it said, "Sorry liberals, your interpretation of Islam doesn't matter," or something like that. Where she makes the claim that the only interpretation of Islam that matters is only the interpretation of Muhammad.
I don't have an interpretation of Islam. It doesn't matter if I did. Moderate Muslims' interpretation doesn't matter. Your interpretation doesn't matter. The historians, the researchers, the scholars, ISIS, it doesn't matter what interpretation of Islam they have. There's only one person in the history of the world whose interpretation matters, and that is Muhammad.
Of course, this is wrong. And let's take a look from the Quran, and the Quran tells us whose interpretation or explanation of Islam is the one that matters. Let's take a look.
And they cannot bring you a question, but we, referring to Allah, have brought you the truth and the best explanation or interpretation. Thus do we, referring to Allah, make the signs clear for people who reflect. And certainly we have brought them a book which we, Allah, make clear with knowledge, a guidance and a mercy for people who believe. Again, on us, Allah, rests the explaining of it. By the book that makes manifest, we revealed it on a blessed night. Truly, we are ever warning. Continuing from the last verse, it says, "Therein is made clear every affair full of wisdom." So as you can see from all these verses, it is clear that Allah is the one who says that He's the one that is the one, who does the explaining. Therefore, He's the one whose interpretation and explanation is the one that matters.
Now, she says that only Muhammad's interpretation matters, and you have to, she says, when you look at Hadith. Interestingly, there was an incident where one of Muhammad's followers at the time, or maybe sometime after his time, but it was shortly thereafter, wanted to know about Muhammad's life, character, etc. Right? And this companion goes to one of Muhammad's wives. And he goes to her and he asked her, basically, like he said, tell me about Muhammad's character. Tell me about him. And her question to this follower was, "Have you not read the Quran?" And this companion responds, "Yes, yeah, I have read the Quran." She said, "Okay, well then, read the Quran. His character was the Quran."
Sa'd bin Hisham was recorded as saying, "I said, O mother of the believers, tell me about the character of the messenger of Allah." She then asked, "Do you not read the Quran?" I said, "Yes, I do." Upon this, she said, "The character of the messenger of Allah was the Quran." So as you can see, Dom, your approach is wrong and incorrect. As you can see here, this wife of the Prophet, Muhammad, told this companion that if he wanted to know about Muhammad, to go read the Quran is what he was supposed to do, which you obviously failed to do in your approach.
So Dom is saying that, only Muhammad's interpretation matters and you got to look at the Hadith. Interestingly, though, when his very own wife, when a contemporary of Muhammad went to a very close relative, his wife, to ask about Muhammad, and how his character was, she told this companion to go read the Quran. Right? She didn't say go pick up this other book to read about him. She didn't say go pick up that book, go look there, go look there. She said, have you not read the Quran? He said, yeah. He said, all right, then go ahead. That's his character was the Quran. She said, go read the Quran about it. So that's what Dom should have done. And as you can see from the verses that I presented, that the interpretation of Muhammad is not the one that matters, because he was the one receiving the revelation. As the verses that I provided show, the interpretation, explanation that matters is that of Allah, the one who gave Muhammad the guidance in the first place. Because as the Quran clearly tells us that, Muhammad, he didn't know the revelation before. He didn't have the knowledge about this. And he himself, the Quran is telling him to say that, tell them that, you're not the one with the knowledge and the authority of these things. Tell them you only follow that which is revealed to you.
Say, I tell you not that with me are the treasures of Allah, nor do I know what is hidden, nor do I tell you I am an angel. I only follow what is revealed to me. Say, I am not the first of the messengers, and I do not know what will be done with me or with you. I do not follow anything but that which is revealed to me, and I am nothing but a plain warner. Very clear and obvious.
The story of Muhammad. When you look at the sources that they claim to use, it's interesting that they overlook the fact that the very sources that they claim to be using tell us that Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the Muslims were being persecuted. That they did not initiate any fighting, they did not initiate any wars or anything or any conflict. All they did was go around and begin to preach that there was only one God, and that their idols, the idols of the pagan Quraysh, the pagans of Mecca, were false and fake, and that it was foolish to be worshiping stone idols and wooden idols and things of this sort. See? They didn't initiate any conflict, they didn't initiate any violence. See? It would be similar like Jesus in his time, where he went around and he was telling the scribes and Pharisees and the people, the Jews, that what they were doing was wrong. Right? He didn't initiate any conflict, but he went around telling them, hey, look, what you're doing is wrong. You're going on the wrong path, etc. And of course, they didn't like it at his time, and they tried to do him in. So Muhammad, the same thing. He didn't go around initiating any fights or with anybody. He went around just telling them, look, you're worshiping these false idols. It's foolish. You're on the wrong path. You're misguided. And hey, look, you need to come to that which is true and start worshiping the one true God. And these people didn't like it. And same thing, they tried to do him in. Why does she ignore that the very sources say that they tried to assassinate Muhammad on several occasions? Why does she ignore that they say that they tried to, or that they tortured? They tortured his family members, right? They made the life for Muslims a living hell. Why do they ignore this part? Why do they always make it seem as if the Muslims just came out of nowhere and just started, coming up and starting fights and everything? No, the Muslims were the ones being persecuted. Those sources tell you that. The very sources that you claim to be using admit that the Muslims were being persecuted by the pagan Quraysh of Mecca. They tell you that, yet these people seem to just overlook that part and act like, oh, the Muslims came out of nowhere and just started. No, the Muslims were the ones being persecuted. And again, those sources tell us this, that the pagan Quraysh, they were the ones in power, and this was a challenge to their power because they were the ones who controlled the religion at the time, the pagan religion. They had the power in their hands. So here's this man preaching that, there's only one true God, and it's not these idols, right? They didn't like this idea. They didn't like it, and they wanted to destroy him and anybody who followed him. So they weren't the ones who started, but he's a murderer, a psychopath, he murdered. And what innocent and by the way, what innocent person did he murder? What innocent person is Muhammad recorded to have murdered? He was being persecuted. They tried to assassinate the man. If somebody's trying to kill me, do I not have a right to fight back? Do I not have a right to try to stop you from trying to assassinate me? How are you innocent if you're trying to murder me and I take up arms to defend myself and my followers take up arms to defend me and themselves against those who are trying to murder us and torture us. How is that? You know, you people, really, your bigotry and your stupidity is just amazing. Okay, so from there, she goes on to mention, you know, the sirah. One of the common sirahs is that of Ibn Ishaq. Okay, and unfortunately for her, she obviously is not aware that there were many Muslims of the past who discounted Ibn Ishaq's accounts, his so-called history, and said that the man was a liar. Fortunately for her, she obviously is not aware that there were many Muslims of the past who discounted Ibn Ishaq's accounts, his so-called history, and said that the man was a liar, that his stories, you know, that they weren't truthful. You see, that he was known as a liar. But you know, people, they love going to these sources to try to discredit in Muhammad's character, whatever. When, you know, again, there's Islamic scholars from the past, a lot of them, who caught this man a clear and blatant liar.
Al-Dhahabi also listed some of the major scholars of Islam who refuted Ibn Ishaq's reliability in hadith narrations. Imam Malik, for instance, called Ibn Ishaq a liar, and Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari, as well as Al-Amash, refuted one of Ibn Ishaq's narrations by saying that he lied. These are strong charges now. These are very strong charges to call a person an outright blatant liar. Imam Ibn Numair said that Ibn Ishaq reported false hadith from unknown narrators. But this is the source that you're going to. You didn't even check this to make sure that the source you were using is reliable. Here you have Muslim scholars themselves saying that the man was a liar, that the man was unreliable in his reports and things like this. As a general statement, Yahya ibn Sa'id graded Ibn Ishaq as being weak in hadith narration. Imam Ahmad also said that Ibn Ishaq did not care from whom he collected hadith, meaning he would just, you know, he didn't care about the character of the person. He didn't care if the person was known to be trustworthy or reliable. He was just taking reports from wherever, you know, from wherever and from whomever, without any discernment for the facts. Al-Dhahabi concluded by saying that among the worst errors made by Ibn Ishaq is that he used to record narrations he collected from anyone, and thus he did not have discernment in this regard. So I wish you people, if you're going to do, you know, try to delve into Islamic sources, why don't you check to see if the source is reliable before you go out and make a fool of yourself by referencing that so-called source.
But again, these things are overlooked. So she mentions a story from, you know, from his so-called, from Ibn Ishaq's so-called history, alleged history, and talks about chapter 33:26, which is said to be a reference to this this particular tribe in Arabia, the Banu Qurayza, right? Again, she ignores the fact, you know, she makes it seem like this tribe was an innocent tribe, and, you know, poor innocent tribe, and Muhammad attacked them, and they did nothing wrong, and he was just a warmonger. No, you're wrong. The sources themselves tell you that this tribe, the Banu Qurayza, was not innocent, that they had an agreement with the Muslims to be at peace, and that if the Muslims had got attacked by the pagans of Mecca, that this tribe would help aid the Muslims in repelling the pagan Meccans. However, what they did is they committed a traitorous act against the Muslims and aligned themselves with the pagan Meccans, and made an agreement that when the pagan Meccans would attack the Muslims, this tribe, the Banu Qurayza, would, from the inside, because they were aligned with the Muslims, they would from the inside attack the Muslims from the inside, and then open up the gates to the city or the fortress and allow the pagan Meccans to come in, and then they would both attack from the inside and from the out. But she makes it like, oh, you know, the Banu Qurayza was this innocent tribe, and they didn't do nothing wrong, and, you know, they wanted to be neutral, and they wanted to seek peace. Where are you getting this from? The sources that you claim to be using tell us that they were not innocent. They were traitorous. They were a traitorous tribe, and that's why they were dealt with the way they were dealt with. See, but they leave that out. They leave that out and ignore the fact that all the sources say that the tribe had, committed an act of treason against the Muslims, and was going to aid the pagan Meccans in their attack against the Muslims, when they had an agreement to be with the Muslims, to help aid the Muslims, and instead they traded against them. But they leave that out. So, she goes on, he was a warmonger. No, he wasn't a warmonger. In the Quran, it's telling Muhammad and the Muslims that you only fight back against those who are fighting you, but don't be the aggressor. It says it, chapter 2, verse 190. You see? You see, it's clear that that's the rule. That's the rule right there. Fight back against those who fight you, but don't be the aggressor. So when you claim he's a warmonger, stop that. Stop that lying. Stop that. You see? And since you seem to be you want to mention hadith, why did you ignore there's a hadith where Muhammad actually says to his followers that don't look to go to battle with your enemy, right? He says don't seek to be in conflict. Don't seek to go to battle with your enemy. However, if you must, not go and not if you want to, if you must, i.e., clearly the enemy is giving you no choice, then be patient and seek help from God in such conflict.
The Prophet said, "Do not wish or seek to meet the enemy, but when you face the enemy, be patient." So it's clear that he is instructing his followers that, don't go out, don't go seeking to meet the enemies and fighting in battles.
But don't seek it. Don't go looking for war. Don't go looking for conflicts, for battle, for fights. But again, they overlook these things because they're twisting and distorting and trying to, paint Islam in their narrative through their bigoted and biased perspective. You see? What else? So she says that, he goes around, he started butchering the tribes. Again, lies. I mean, blatant lies. Blatant lies. Okay? Again, the sources let us know that the Muslims were the ones being persecuted. The Quran even talks about it, how they were under persecution. And it tells them that persecution is worse than slaughter, which is why they were instructed to repel the persecution.
And fight them until there is no persecution. And the way of life is only for Allah. But if they stop, then there should be no hostility except against the oppressors. Ibn Umar said, and there were very few Muslims, so a man used to be persecuted on account of his religion. They either murdered him or subjected him to tortures. Islam later became predominant, then the persecution stopped.
Because being a persecuted people is like living in a living hell. So the Muslims were told, don't go out suffering like that. Repel the persecution, because persecution is worse than being killed. At least if you're killed, then the persecution is over. You ain't got to worry about it because you're no longer in this life. But to live and suffer through constant persecution, it's like living in a living hell. All right. So then she goes on that this tribe supposedly was demanded that no, they weren't demanded anything. They were brought to a consensual agreement that they would stand together against the attack of the pagans, Meccans, and they broke that. They violated that. And because of that violation, the Muslims had to fight the pagan Meccans, and they had to deal with this tribe. All right, they had to deal with this tribe. All right. So then, she goes on reading some alleged stories that, Muhammad's wife sat there and they watched all these people get beheaded and all this foolishness, all these claims that they make, and like most ignorant anti-Islamic bigots, she claims that that it was Muhammad who did all the, ordered the beheading. Again, these people, they don't read. The story itself of this tribe and what happened to them, everyone ignores. Especially these anti-Islamic ignorant bigots, idiot bigots. They ignore that right in the very text of the story, it tells them that the Banu Qurayza, they did not want Muhammad to pass judgment upon them, right? So he allowed them to pick a person of their choice to make judgment. They picked this person by the name of Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh was an ally of them. He was a former, they said he was like a former Jewish leader or something of this sort. So the story itself, again, the text of these stories tell them this, but they seem to overlook these things. They say, oh, Muhammad was the one. No, the story tells them that Muhammad said, all right, I will allow you to pick whoever you want to give the judgment upon you. And the story itself says they picked this man by the name of Sa'd ibn Mu'adh to pass the judgment upon them, because he was their ally. He was a Jewish man, or former Jewish man himself.
The third of the Jewish tribes, Banu Qurayza, sided with the Qurayshites and their allies, who made an unsuccessful attack on Medina in an attempt to destroy Islam. This, the most serious challenge to Islam, failed, and the Banu Qurayza were in turn besieged by the Prophet. Like Banu al-Nadir, in time they surrendered, but unlike the Banu al-Nadir, they were subjected to the arbitration of Sa'd bin Mu'adh, a member of the Aus tribe, allies of Qurayza. He ruled, not Muhammad. He ruled, not Muhammad. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, he ruled that the grown-up males should be put to death and the women and children subjected to slavery. This is from a source that you said that you referenced. So how did you ignore that Ibn Ishaq in what you, I'm using it because that's what you said you used, yet it tells you that it wasn't Muhammad that put this ruling upon them. So I don't get it. I don't get how you missed that.
So guess what Sa'd ibn Mu'adh did? Which these idiot bigots don't know. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh gave them a ruling, since they were a Jewish tribe, based upon what the Torah says, what the Bible says. And I'll show you the verse that he actually used to show what happened to them. So,
when you approach a city to fight against it, you shall offer it terms of peace. If it agrees to make peace with you and opens to you, then all the people who are found in shall become your forced labor and shall serve you. However, if it does not make peace with you but makes war against you, then you shall besiege it. When the Lord your God gives it into your hand, you shall strike all the men with it with the edge of the sword. Only the women and the children and the animals and all that is in the city and its spoils you shall take as booty for yourself. And you shall use the spoil of your enemies, which the Lord your God has given to you. So this is where that rule, notice it says the same exact thing. The men are put to the sword, and the women and children are taken as captives. Same exact thing that hadith says, and it comes from the Torah ruling.
Based because he was Jewish and they were Jewish, he passed judgment upon them based upon what the Old Testament says, or the Torah says, which was that what? That the men were to be put to the edge of the sword, and that the women and children were to be taken as captives or spoils of war or whatever. This is what the Bible says, and he used that. If they would have allowed Muhammad to make the judgment, then Muhammad would have used what the Quran says, which is that, you know, the people are taken as prisoners of war, and you could ransom them off. Either you could ransom them back to their people, right? Or you could set some of them free just on goodwill. That's what the Quran says to do with the prisoners of war. You see? So if they would have allowed Muhammad to make the judgment, he would have had a more lenient and merciful judgment upon them. But instead, they picked Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, and he used the Torah to judge. So I always remind people that think about this. Say if the Banu Qurayza had beaten the Muslims, then they would have used the Torah to pass judgment upon the Muslims that they defeated, and they would have killed all the men, the Muslim men, and they would have taken the Muslim women and children as captives, because that's what the Torah says to do. But because these people are such bigots, and you know they hate Islam, and I think, you know, I've made videos about this before, that what I've surmised over the years is that the reason why you notice that it's a lot of white people who seem to hate Islam is because Islam is not controlled by them. You see, Muhammad is not presented, there's no pictures of Muhammad as a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, white, good-looking white man. You see? And so, because in their minds this is the religion of the Arabs. This is the religion of the sand niggers, as they call them. That they can't, they just can't fathom themselves accepting this religion of these sand people. These. So as I said, she goes on into all this other nonsense about Muhammad beheaded Rayhana's husband and he raped her. He raped Aisha. Please, where is this? Where are you? And again, by her own words, she's using our sources. She says, what source says? And she says, oh, Aisha spoke for herself, and Aisha, herself admits this.
Aisha is here talking about one of the women who was beheaded along with the men. She was actually watching this at about 12 years old at the time, next to her prophet husband. But of course, I mean, if you're raped at age 9, which all the hadith agree is the age, even from her own lips.
Where does Aisha admit that she was raped by Muhammad? Please, I would love to see that. What source where Aisha says, in your words, don't say, oh, it says that. No, you say she admits in her own words that she was raped by Muhammad. Please show me that. Please show me where Aisha is recorded as saying she was raped by Muhammad. Please show me that. Okay, I would love to see that. I haven't seen that in all the years I've been Muslim. I've yet to see the text where Aisha says that she was raped by Muhammad. Please show me that. And again, I want to see it in those exact words, because those are the words you use. Don't say, oh, they got married at this age. No, you said she herself said she was raped by him. Please show me where she says she was raped by Muhammad. Okay, that's what I want to see. All right. So she mentions, some woman, Rayhana or whatever, and then Muhammad, killed the family and all this. She's saying Muhammad did this, Muhammad did that. Again, where she mentions these sources, but where did the sources say that Muhammad himself did it, that he raped her, and he did this to her husband and all this nonsense that you speak? You see? She goes on to mention chapter 4, verse 24, which she says is supposed to be about some particular, particular incident about a woman by the name of Safiya, who, again, she says Muhammad, beheaded her family and all this nonsense, and she, was taken as his wife and all this stuff like this. And she mentions 424. And that 424, if you read verse 23 and 24 together, and verse 25 actually, if you read through starting at verse 23, it's talking about who you are allowed to marry as a Muslim. Who are you allowed to marry and who you're not allowed to marry.
So as we see, starting at verse 23, the context is clear. Forbidden to you are your mothers and your daughters and your sisters and your paternal aunts. Basically going through members of your family that obviously you can't marry. Okay? And so that's the context of these verses. It's talking about who you can and cannot marry. So it goes through this, talking about who you cannot marry, again, your mothers, your daughters, your aunts, etc. You can't marry them. And then it starts to talk about who you then can marry. That's the context of the verses. And then we come to verse 24, where now it starts to talk about who you then can marry. And all married women, except those whom your right hand possess. This is Allah's ordinance to you, and lawful for you are all women besides those, provided that you seek them with their property, taking them in marriage, not committing fornication. Then as to those whom you profit by, give them their dowries as appointed. And there is no blame on you about what you mutually agree after what is appointed. Surely Allah is knowing, wise. Continuing on to verse 25. And whoever among you has not within his power an ampleness of means to marry free believing women, then he may marry of those whom your right hand possess from among your believing maidens. And Allah knows best your faith. You are the one from the other. So marry them with the permission of their masters, and give them their dowries justly, they being chaste, not fornicating. That refutes you right there, because you said you could just, that they were being raped and you taking them. No, it says not fornicating, nor receiving secret lovers as such. Okay? And they're supposed to be taken in marriage. It's very clear.
It's in context. It's not the 24. Verse 24 stands by itself. It's verse 23. It starts at verse 23. And verse 23 starts off talking about who you as a Muslim man can marry and cannot. You can't marry your own, women from your own family. You can't marry your mother, your sister, your aunts, such and such. It goes through a list of people who you cannot marry, and then talks about who you are allowed to marry. And in the inclusion of who you are allowed to marry, it included that you could marry either a free woman or you could marry a woman who was a slave, because as you idiots should know, slavery existed already. Slavery was already in the world. Islam didn't introduce slavery. In fact, there's no verse in the Quran that says to go and make slaves of anybody. No verse in the Quran says go and make slaves. I repeat, there is no verse in the Quran that says then go and make slaves or capture people to make them your slaves. No verse says that. What these verses deal with is a situation, an institution that already existed. Slavery was already in existence hundreds of years before Islam, before the Quran was revealed, right? So it naturally is going to address those people. So it lets the Muslims know of the women who you cannot marry, which included family members and things of this nature. And then it says who you could marry. And in the inclusion of who you could marry, it said you could marry a slave woman, right? You could marry a slave woman. And it clearly says, in contradiction to what you said, that you could this is about you could rape them. No, the verse clearly says you have to give them their dowries. You have to marry them. If it's a slave woman of another person, owned by another person, that you have to marry them with the permission of their masters. But it clearly says you got to give them their dowries. You got to marry them. It says that you can't take them as lovers. So that refutes your claim right there that, you could just nilly-willy do what you want with them and whatever. So if you were an owner of slaves, you could marry women from among your slaves. But you had to give them their dowry. It wasn't you just take them and do what you want to do with them, right? You had to give them their dowries, and you had to take them in marriage. It says you can't have them as lovers, i.e. there's no premarital, you can't just have sex with her as you please. You had to take them in marriage. It clearly says you cannot have them as lovers. You give them their dowry, and you decide on the dowry between the man and the wife. Mutual agreement about it. So that refutes and destroys your claim right there. Okay? So, again, this is what they ignore, that it tells you in the context of who you're supposed to, who you can and cannot marry. That's what these verses were about. That's what these verses were about. The explanation is right there in it itself. You don't need to look anywhere else. The verses is talking about who you can and cannot marry. That's what it's talking about. It ain't talking about raping nobody or any of this foolish nonsense that you people like to bring up. Okay? So then she goes on to talk about, she mentions a couple of, collections of hadith, Abu Dawood, Muslim, or whatever, runs off some numbers, and she says these are talking about people that Muhammad was supposed to have killed. To mention these stories where she's saying that Muhammad, wanted to, kill these people who, used to, mock him or tease him or whatever the case may be. But again, you see, the Quran addresses this very issue. There are several verses in the Quran that talk about this very problem, this very issue of people who, would mock Muhammad or whatever the case may be. And interestingly, there is no verse whatsoever where Muhammad is instructed to kill anyone for mocking him or teasing him or whatever the case, or insulting him or whatever the case may be. I will show you. Let's take a look at the verses and you will see there's no verse in the Quran anywhere that says, Muhammad, kill those who mock you, kill those who insult you. Let's take a look at all the verses that address, or several of the verses that address this issue, and you will see that none of them say to kill any of these people.
Therefore, be patient of what they say, and sing the praise of your Lord before the rising of the sun and before the setting. So here he's being instructed very clearly to be patient with what they say. Here he's told that God will suffice him. Surely we, Allah, will suffice you against the scoffers or the mockers. So once again, he's being told, look, don't worry about it. God is all you need. Don't worry about what they're saying, what their insults are, whatever. God is all you need. God will suffice you against what they say. Bear then patiently what they say, and glorify your Lord by the praising of him before the rising of the sun and before its setting. And it goes on. Once again, he's told to bear patiently what they say. Not kill them, assassinate, murder them for mocking you. No, instead, bear patiently what they say. Just bear it. Bear it patiently. Don't worry, God will suffice you against what they say. This is what it says. Do not yield to those who deny the truth and the hypocrites. Ignore their hurtful talk. Ignore their hurtful talk. Put your trust in God. God is all sufficient. See? You will surely be tried and tested in your possessions and your persons, and you shall surely hear many hurtful things from those who were given the book before you and from those who set our partners with God. But if you endure with fortitude and restrain yourselves, that indeed is a matter of strong determination. So here again, he's told to be patient, to bear it with patience, to trust in God, and you will be okay. Not to murder them, not to assassinate them, hurt them, whatever. Just bear patiently and don't worry about it. God is all that you need against them.
Now, but in the references that she makes up, right, that she brings up, that some of these people were said to have been killed, again, in several of them, you see that these people were not, they were doing more than mocking. And many of some of the writers, commentators about these so-called alleged stories say that it wasn't because these people were mocking him, it was because they were doing more than mocking. They were, they were inciting people to attack the Muslims. They were inciting people to fight the Muslims and attack them and fight them and torture them and try to kill Muhammad, inciting people, telling people to kill the Muslims or attack the Muslims and things of this nature. And this is the reason why, these people had been dealt with. Had nothing to do because they were just teasing or mocking. It's because they were actually inciting people and actually getting people to actually attack and fight and kill the Muslims. And they say this is the reason why these people were dealt with. Again, they ignore these things right there. Because I find it amazing that a lot of times in the very text that they claim to be using, the explanation is given to them, but they ignore it. And they come up with their own bigoted, lying interpretation when the text itself tells them what the situation was and why whatever took place. You see? But as I said, let's take a look at these verses from the Quran that address the issue of those who mock him or insult Muhammad. And notice, nowhere is he told to kill anyone for mocking him or insulting him. Who did she mention? She mentioned Hind bint Utbah. I don't know why you mentioned this one, because this one doesn't support your false claim. This woman was the daughter of one of, she was the daughter of a lot of prominent pagan Quraysh who, of course, as I mentioned, had been attacking and persecuting the Muslims. And she was married to Abu Sufyan, who was a very, staunch enemy of the Muslims in the early period. And she used to go out. The stories say it. I don't know why they ignore it. The stories say that she used to go out in the battles with the pagan and would urge them on to fight and attack the Muslims. And a lot of times when the Muslim soldiers would get killed, she would be going, it says she would go out through the battlefield and she would mutilate their bodies. She would cut off their ears and do all kind of mutilations to their bodies and things like this. And one day, in one of the battles, Muhammad's uncle gets killed, and she goes and she mutilates Muhammad's uncle Hamza. She mutilates his body. She cuts open his body. She takes his liver, and they said she begins to, like chew on his liver or something of this sort. I mean, she was so angry and venomous that she ripped out his entrails and took his liver and was chewing on it in anger or something like this. So Muhammad is said to see that his uncle, after the battle is done, he sees that his uncle had been mutilated, and people, I guess reported that she was the one who had mutilated the body, because, people would see her on the battlefield doing these things. So, of course, it was his uncle. He was upset or whatever. But in the end, he didn't do anything to her. He didn't do anything to him. In fact, later on, after the Quraysh are finally defeated from persecuting the Muslims, she later becomes a Muslim herself, and is said that she goes down in history as actually, when she becomes a Muslim, she winds up joining the Muslims and becomes a very prominent figure in the Muslims, because she started to then help the Muslims in battles, like she used to help the pagans attack the Muslims. So I don't understand why you'd mention her. She doesn't support, she doesn't, you know, follow the narrative of, you know, the so-called innocent people who got hurt. I mean, she was mutilating and urging people to kill and murder Muslims. And when they got killed, she would mutilate their bodies and do all kind of things to desecrate their bodies. So I'm not sure why you would have put her in as if she was some innocent person. You know, I don't get that. She mentions the story that the blind man, Muhammad didn't kill that blind man's wife. Again, I don't understand these people. Again, if you read the story, the blind man was said to have killed his wife himself. Muhammad didn't say do it. Muhammad didn't order him to do it. The man had committed this act completely on his own without any orders from Muhammad. Okay? So, you know, please, these people, I tell you, they just really, I mean, wow. You know what I mean? She claims that it's backed up by the Quran. Again, I already showed you that Muhammad, nowhere is it backed up from the Quran that you're supposed to murder or kill anybody who insults or makes mockery of Muhammad. So that's not backed up by the Quran. You know, again, all I can say is that you're blatantly lying. You're blatantly lying. That's not backed up by the Quran. I gave the verses already. Okay? So then she just goes on to, like, pretty much to start insulting him, and then Muhammad was a paranoid whine. No, he wasn't paranoid. The stories, again, the sources say they were trying to murder him. They tried to assassinate him on several occasions. So that's not paranoia. Okay? That's not paranoia. All right? But, you know, that's what these people do. They just want to offend, and they just want to be offensive, and, you know, the facts don't matter to them. As long as they can get their jollies off of insulting the Muslims and saying things that would be offensive to Muslims, you know, they don't really give a damn about the truth. That's just a fact of the matter. All right. She goes on to say that, you know, he didn't have any miracles. Again, since you're reading hadith, since you're claiming that you're going to hadith, there are hadiths that says that he performed certain miracles. So why are, you know, you're claiming that you're looking at the sources supposedly, but then you're ignoring again. So all I can charge you with that you're a blatant, bold-faced, lying liar. You know, you're just a liar. Because if you were reading these things, they're said to be that he did perform miracles according to these sources. If you're reading them, you're the one. I'm going by you. You're the one who claims that you read the hadiths. So if that's what you're using, well, the hadiths say that he did miracles. So, you know, it's amazing how these people claim to be using so-called Muslim sources and then turn around and ignore what the sources say or blatantly tell lies there. You see, then you want to use it, but then you don't want to use it when it comes to certain things that don't support your position. It's funny. She says there was no witness to revelation. Again, there are recordings that sometimes that there were some companions by who said they did witness when he received revelation. So, you know, again. So she said, if logic was used, then, you know, well, you know, take your own advice. Take your own advice. Take your own advice. If logic was used, you would have seen that your position from the very beginning is wrong. That the interpretation of the Quran or of Islam that matters is that which comes from the one who revealed it, which was not Muhammad but Allah, and it says it right in the Quran. That he's the one that guides. Allah is the one that guides. Muhammad is just the messenger, right? In fact, it even tells Muhammad that your guide, you know, it's not upon you to guide the people.
The guiding of them is not thy duty, but Allah guides whom He will. Surely you cannot guide whom you love, but Allah guides whom He pleases, and He knows best the followers of the right way. Again, very clear and direct, obvious.
Your job is to deliver the message only. Allah is the one who guides them. It says that in the Quran. Your job, you know, you're not the one. You're not the one. It's not upon you their guidance. Don't worry about guiding them. It's Allah who does the guiding. Your job is to deliver the message. So if you were trying to follow some kind of logic, you would have seen that your position from the start was false and wrong. She says that, you know, in Islam, logic in questioning is discouraged. Again, wrong. Wrong again. She mentions, in some country, well, hey, that might be some Arab countries, but that's not Islam. Islam encourages questions. Islam encourages you to research. It says it in the Quran. It talks about, there are many verses that talk about bringing your evidence, bringing your proof, if you're truthful. It talks about having a discourse with people, arguing with people in the best manner. You see, having a dialogue, a discourse with them where you try to prove your point. It doesn't say what you're saying. It doesn't, that's y'all religion. That's y'all book. Y'all religion is the one that teaches about blind following and all that. No, that's y'all religion. Okay, Islam says no. If you're truthful, bring your evidence. Says they say they got a book. Says bring your book. Why is it saying bring the book? So we can examine it and see what you're doing. Produce your proof if you're truthful. It says ponder on the creation. Reflect. These are the words. These are the words that are used in the Quran. Reflect, ponder, bring evidence, etc. So sorry, but questioning is not discouraged.
And of course, this verse refutes you clearly. Verily, the vilest of all creatures in the sight of God, sight of Allah, are those deaf, those dumb ones who do not use their reason. So he's encouraging to use your reason as opposed to what you claim.
Questioning is not discouraged. Using your brain to think is not discouraged. You're wrong. Okay? So we wanted to deal with that, and as you can see, this person has been refuted.